We are 36 days from the early signing day in December, and LSU now has just fired. Yeah, exactly. And LSU has just fired its head coach, Brian Kelly, on Sunday evening. That looking up that timeline hit me about the same way that you just saw it hit Sam in real time. December 3rd is when some of these signatures are going to come in, and there's a lot to unpack now on top of the usual, because LSU is starting off a national coaching search to replace Brian Kelly. We're going to talk about what to watch for the Tigers over the next month plus on the recruiting trail, as well as a couple of notable Louisiana commitments, one to the Tigers, in fact, that came on Monday morning. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser, and it's always an interesting time as you get closer and closer to that signing period. And, there are some flips here and there. And now in Louisiana, it's that much more interesting because, as we mentioned, Brian Kelly fired midway through his fourth year, Frank Wilson III taking over as the interim head coach, and just an awful lot to unpack. Sam, 36 hours into all of this, I guess, just how has everything been for you to start unpacking, connecting with some of these prospects that we've been covering for 4 and 5 years? And, in some cases we're locked in LSU already. In some cases we're still considering LSU. What have been some of the, I guess, reactions to you initially to the Kelly news?
Yeah. Thank you also, Jared, for clarifying Frank Wilson III will be the interim coach, because I almost called Quad and said, what is up, man? Like, life comes at you fast sometimes.
Let's get a quote from Coach Quad. Yeah.
I think, knowing the background, having covered Coach Miles, covered Coach Orgeron, and part of this BK era, I think that I know I just got literally done saying this on the Hunt Palmer show. Plug our friend in there as well.
Free advertising for the Hunt Palmer show.
They need it. That ESPN radio. The expectations are always high at LSU. It doesn't matter what the season is. That it's always high. There's always an expectation. And when they're winning, the talk about BK not being a fit was not as wide spoken. But I can remember the first camp that he was there as the head coach for, barely seeing him, and that was such a nuanced experience for me because, even though Les Miles also watched from his office, was also on the field for so many stretches of that camp, watching drills so closely at certain portions. Ed Orgeron, I don't even think knew where his office upstairs was. He never, maybe he brought kids to there after to offer them, but he started camp off in drills and stretching with those kids during warmups. So for PK to be as go ahead.
Ed is not an employed coach right now, and he's still in drills every day.
Correct.
It seems like every time he's all over the place coaching. Yeah.
It's just, I think to be the head coach at LSU, you either need to win games or you need to be one of the people there. And I think that BK at this point in the season was neither of those things. And I thought his first season inspired so much hope. You had heard from parents and grandparents and brothers and players there that were like, yeah, like he's all right, like he's okay, because they were winning. And I think that the doubters have certainly come to the forefront now, because the truth is this is a man that Notre Dame's leading rusher is Jeremiah Love. Their second leading rusher, Jadarian Price, tried to commit to BK on a Saturday when he was a high school recruit. BK didn't answer the phone for the kid after days of trying, after his staff begging him to take the phone call until that Wednesday, which I think when you think of being a successful head coach at a place in the SEC or a place like LSU, you better answer that phone. And I think that kind of persona, it didn't, like I said, not to beat a dead drum, it doesn't fit when you're not winning those games. And I think A&M showed a gap in the second half of their win on Saturday. Nobody goes to LSU and embarrasses LSU. The last time I can remember really was when Tua and Nick Saban's team did it. And it certainly led to some deep talks about the future in Baton Rouge back then. And certainly, I think the way that it didn't fit for BK, that was enough. This is a fan base, is a talented team that they invested a ton in through the NIL and recruited the heck out. They've signed top 10 classes every single year, and they have effectively, under Frank Wilson and our buddy Joe Sloan, who also got bad news on Monday because the offense has certainly not been running the ball at a clip. The offensive line, after sending so many kids to the draft, including Will Campbell and Emory Jones, is not playing up to LSU standard. And I think Frank Wilson and that staff have and Cortez Hankton and Corey Raymond, Blake Baker, you name it, and go on for days. Jake Olson, Kevin Thompson. I think I'm exhausted all of our options here. Have recruited extremely well, and they've beaten these Texas A&Ms and these Alabamas and Georgias and Ohio States for some of the top recruits, not only in Louisiana, but they're coveted across the country. So I think that whoever they hire next either has to win games or they have to be a fit within the community of Louisiana, which I think BK obviously proved to be unable to do either. But I'm excited to see what they do in this direction next. I think the most common question I've been fielded is like, why has you've not seen a lot of decommitments? Well, I say, good tune in. They're coming. LSU is not going to be able to hold on to all these out-of-state commitments. Other teams are digging in their heels. And if they are able to salvage the 2026 class, which is, I think, 63 or 64% in-state prospects, that wouldn't surprise me. But a lot is going to hinge on who is retained and who is hired.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that we talk a lot about. That was one of the things that I was asked throughout Sunday was, I guess, even before the news became official that them being made to let go BK was, hey, in talking to some of the in-state prospects throughout the recruiting process, how many of them really mentioned BK as a reason that they were committing to LSU? And to be honest, some mentioned him, but it was always kind of like a third or fourth kind of throw in that they like, or they like BK, or, we're fine with BK or whatever. But so much more for the in-state guys was that they wanted to be a part of LSU, or, in some cases DBU, like, Pook Ellis wants to play with Corey Raymond and dynamics like that. And then the position coaches, I want to play for Corey Raymond. I want to play for Cortez Hankton. I have great relationships with Brad Davis and so on. And so I think that bodes really well for, as you said, a class that is 2/3 in-state guy right now. And, that's no guarantees. We'll see. These are top prospects on a national scale that are going to continue to hear from programs that are going to poke any hole they can in a commitment to try and flip a guy late. And so we'll continue to monitor all of that, both in-state and, more tenuously the out-of-state guys, obviously. But some of the fit dynamics are interesting. Everyone now we're like hot on the Danny Lewis dancing TikTok video again is top of mind on Twitter. The family accent thing is top of mind. And honestly, as much as people are going to harp on those things, the other part of what you said is just the winning games, winning big games, winning at a national championship contending level, because you can be, you don't have to be Edo to be successful at LSU, and you don't have to be from Louisiana at all. You can be a corny dude from elsewhere in the country, but winning is kind of the fix all, and that did not happen in or to the level that was expected of this program, and particularly this year where you invest $18 million into the transfer portal because you feel like you can build a contender around Nussmeier and Howard Perkins and company, and then you're currently outside of the top 10 in the SEC standing. So that was all really tough. But BK starting and the questions of the fit and whatnot, one of the things that happened at the very beginning of his tenure was he came in and he cleaned house, and there were a lot of weird relationship dynamics where Corey Raymond's waiting for news of what's going to happen with his role and doesn't hear anything for it. It sounded like a week or more before he finally decides, I need to go take this opportunity with Billy Napier and company at Florida. And there were a lot of guys, including Tommy Moffitt, who is also top news right now because of the job of that A&M strength program and the way that showed in the second half. A lot of guys that were mainstays in the LSU program under multiple head coaches who were let go. And I think that now is so critical to what we're going to be talking about over the next month is, is a guy like Corey Raymond going to be in the fold under the next head coach? Is a guy like Frank Wilson, we think, going to be in the fold under the next head coach? And those are going to be the conversations that are most critical to keeping this class intact.
Yeah, I think you're 100%. I think, it starts at the top. You imagine that, when they did the search and they hired BK, it wasn't just, it was a firm, but it was led by Scott Woodward. At this point, Austin Thomas is the general manager of this program, and he has Kelvin Bolden and Jeff Martin and J.R. Belton and multiple stalwarts of that front office that has been assembled in Baton Rouge that I imagine at least Austin Thomas, if not more of those faces, will be involved in this consultation, if you will. With that being said, no assistant coach living, working, breathing today has been a better recruiter in the state of Louisiana than Frank Wilson III. He is the godfather of the boot. He has been a head coach, and he's, I don't think he's trying to contend to be the future head coach of the Tigers. But I think, if they're able to get a win or two, especially in Tiger Stadium down the stretch, I think that'll really help his case. But I don't think he needs much more than his track record and being the catalyst to largely keeping this 2026 class. He played a closer. He was the Mariano Rivera in Lamar Brown's recruitment, the number one player in America. He is the glue holding together Aiden Hall and Big Rich Anderson down at Edna Carr, the powerhouse, the number 2 defensive lineman in the country. And, I think yours and my opinion both that one of the best ball hawking safeties, not only in Louisiana, but around the country. I think I could speak for Jabari Mack, having spoken to Dad. If Cortez Hankton is a part of this, Jabari Mack will be a part of it. And that's why I say if they hire a head coach that understands Louisianimals, I don't know what the right term is, Louisianans, then they're going to be just fine, because Jabari Mack, like many others, want to play for the Tigers. And Cortez Hankton, of course, who has won a national championship and has turned a ton of talented kids into professionals from Saturdays on to Sundays, has a resume. But should he not be retained, that's where, if you hire another Brian Kelly or, insert Bland's coach here, then you're risking losing a player like Jabari Mack, who's still going to be coveted around the country. But if you're able to find that right fit with the right head coach who understands the importance of staff members like Frank, like Cortez, like Corey Raymond, like Blake Baker, etc., who are Louisiana homemade guys, then you have a chance, because there's a lot of talent in Baton Rouge. There's a lot of great coaches in Baton Rouge. There's a lot of great minds and people that, relationship builders in that state, evaluators. They got a lot of good things going. I think the biggest issue was the head coach.
Yeah, look, we've been super complimentary for quite some time about the staff that was put together at this point under BK, and it felt like that was one of the things that hurt them earlier in his tenure, was some mistakes in terms of staffing that thing out, and that some of those things were being corrected and bringing in some guys that we thought were doing a pretty good job. And honestly, coming out of Saturday night, because of the magnitude of the buyout for BK, I thought that he was probably going to survive at least the year, and that after performance like that in Saturday night, someone was going to have to go. The fan base was rightfully up in arms up scale of 1 to 10 up to about 11. And so it felt like Joe Sloan was going to have to be on his way out. And that if you tried to say, there's going to be a move at the special teams coordinator or something like that, that was not going to be sort of a big enough, pelt on the wall of change for the fan base to be content. And honestly, it felt like not even firing Joe was going to be a big enough, move for the fan base to be comfortable with. And as much as you can look at a fan base at times and say that they jump to extremes one way or the other, I felt like they were right, because while there were shortcomings with the offensive execution, certainly, and, things were, I'm sure, not up to where Joe Sloan wanted them to be in terms of the results on the field in some places, or Nuss or anybody involved with it, the issues were just clearly such a bigger thing that if you didn't make a change at the top, that it wasn't going to matter. It was just going to be a sacrificial lamb that wasn't ultimately going to change anything. So watching how the staff comes together and how many of these guys do get opportunities to be a part of this moving forward. And I think there are, echo what you said, there are some guys that can be a part of really successful teams that are already on this staff. The other piece that's super interesting to me is just the timeline of it all, because again, signing day is 36 days from now. The playoffs won't start until after that. There are guys that are being connected to this coaching search, and, hot names like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is probably going to be in the playoffs. John Summerall at Tulane is a guy that is very much in contention with his Green Wave team to potentially be a group of 5 participant in the playoffs. And how that gets navigated, and whether some of these prospects are willing to sign without even knowing who the head coach is going to be. Not just, I'm going to commit to a new head coach, but am I going to potentially commit to, a vacancy essentially with the LSU program is going to be super interesting to me. But at the same time, don't you, if you're LSU, want to hire a coach that is proving successful where he's at? How do you, I guess, from your perspective, sort of juggle those competing interests of, they want someone who's successful, but also you probably want someone in place here pretty quickly, at least by early December or so, just to let prospects know who they're potentially signing up with?
Yeah, from what I understand, I think they'd like to have a coach in mind before the end of November. This is going to pick up quickly. I don't know if that means an agreement in place with the agents. Obviously, agents can do negotiating, and it just takes the coach to sign off on a number. I don't know. I don't know if we've ever seen, because Lane Kiffin, potentially Kenny Dillingham, could be coaching in playoff games. I don't know how that affects, their ability to continue to get their own players to buy in Oxford and Tempe, respectively. But the truth is, you can solve all that by just hiring Nick Saban, who's currently unemployed and just working for College Game Day. And I can almost assure you the fan base would love it. But to me, I expect them to have a coach, or at least a name that they will be able to give these kids, because there's a head coaching. There's going to be a change. They're going to be allowed to have an extra allotted visit back to campus, or an additional official visit, whether that comes in November, December, or January, to be determined by the kid and the university, of course. But I would expect them to have some traction. We're, like you said, 36 hours removed. We already know a nucleus of candidates, and we also know Scott Woodward BK was not on the list, the hot board, when LSU hired BK. At that time, I remember getting calls that Mel Tucker was in Baton Rouge, and the Oklahoma Jet had been spotted, that Lincoln Riley came out, but not BK. That was one that flew under the rug. He likes home run hires. Maybe it's a team or a head coach that is very successful, that maybe is just a little bit off the beaten path. Maybe they're competing for a playoff spot. Maybe they don't make it. But I would say that there's probably some names that are not being mentioned that are probably getting considered that we're not talking about, that might impress this fan base. And maybe we're not talking about them because they're not exactly competing at the same levels, but we'll see.
Yeah, the timeline dynamic, and this isn't an LSU specific thing, but just the nature of the college football calendar right now, the timing dynamics of a coaching change are messy as hell, and there's just not a lot of good way around that if you're a top level team and want someone that brings with it success. Because to your point before, if you reach an agreement but the guy doesn't leave his team yet, that's, does that news come out intentionally? Does it leak out? It's probably coming out one way or another. And then you've got someone leading a playoff team, or even if it's, we keep talking about the head coaches, but even if it was like a Will Stein or somebody at Oregon, if it was a high level coordinator, it's the same sort of deal where you now are trying to compete for a national championship, but there's that uncertainty and just that extra storyline of hurdle that you have to deal with. And for LSU in particular, you're in the middle of a hiring process for a new university president, which means that you've got the governor of the state is involved in some of these conversations, which means that when there's a new president in place, how do things play out for Scott Woodward as the AD? Does a president come in and want to make a change there? There are so many additional variables on top of the already baseline mess of being a college football program, making a coaching change in the transfer portal era. So there are going to be a lot of pieces to watch. And I agree with you that as many names as we're talking about out the gate, there are going to be more that fans should certainly keep an eye on as this thing continues to kind of develop over the course of the next few weeks and, the next month or so. But let's talk about some of these Louisiana prospects that have made new commitment announcements in the past week and a half. And we'll start with one who becomes kind of a funny anecdote for this 2026 LSU class, because I was asked yesterday, how is this going to affect the ability to kind of keep in-state prospects on board? And I said, well, funnily enough, Kervin Johnson Jr. from Tioga committed Monday morning, less than 24 hours after the BK news, just a couple hours after the Joe Sloan news was made official. And so a new commitment enters the class from in-state, and it's someone that, not unlike some of the coaching candidates we were talking about, is not a guy that LSU fans know for the most part or were monitoring. I don't even know that many recruiting media realized who he was or that he was committed to Louisiana Tech until he was flipping to LSU over the course of the weekend. But I think another nice addition to that receiving class that right now had Jabari Mack and Kenny Darby already on board, a guy that's a three-sport athlete up there at Tioga, a big target, a basketball player that can go up and get the ball. Just your reactions to Kervin as now a member of this Tigers class and what that means for the receiving group or the class as a whole. Just a positive sign, obviously, for in-state recruiting despite everything going on.
Yeah, they wanted to sign 3 or even 4 wide receivers this cycle, and they were looking for senior evals. We had talked about it before the season that the USC commit from Opelousas was an option. We also know that Ja'Kai Anderson seems to never want to play his senior season.
Poor Ja'Kai, man.
I know. Just has not gotten the green light yet. So senior evals, and that's been Kervin Johnson, who's been extremely explosive as a senior at Tioga. This guy is a bull in a china shop. Every time, his film is extremely fun to watch. He's big play after big play. No one can seem to wrap up Kervin Johnson in space. He's not a prospect I'm super familiar with. I've loved the early reviews from film. If he was a junior, I'd be giddy. But to me, come on. What says Frank Wilson is now the interim head coach at LSU? By flipping an in-state commitment on day one, before we look ahead to the game plan, let's get this Tioga kid on board. Who I got to call? Just typical Frank being Frank. Maybe giggle. I love that Rivals tweeted out the picture with BK and added even more giggles to the mix. And
yeah,
that's that.
Kervin's good, man. I have not had a chance to see him live on a Friday night, but I've seen him a bunch on the 7-on-7 circuit. And he's a tall, long kid, but he's got some strength to him and can box out guys a little bit, use his body well to create some separation on top of what he's able to do with his route running and athleticism and all those things. And he catches pretty much everything thrown his way. And he's a big piece of Tioga having another good season right now. So I like the addition. It was interesting to me in the spring that he wasn't getting more attention. Like I think he picked up a McNeese State offer, and I was watching him be one of the top players at 7-on-7 tournaments and asking what was going on, and just not really getting much traction with it. And even when he committed to Louisiana Tech in September, was just kind of an under the radar quiet addition, it seemed like, where I didn't realize it had happened for like a week after it had happened. The other big one for us to talk about, a guy that we've talked about a bunch on the show, 2027 Benton quarterback Malachi Zeigler, committed to SMU about a week and a half ago. When we last had a chance to talk, we were waiting for, okay, Javon Vital is about to be the second 2027 prospect in the state to announce a commitment. He ended up pushing pause on that, is going to wait till after this Hamilton Christian season and make an announcement now planned for this winter. And Malachi stepped up and made his foray into the commitment class coming out of Louisiana with SMU. Your thoughts on Malachi? SMU is a program that had been well positioned with him for a while, and I know there's a great mutual affinity between him and Coach Lashley and company out there in the DFW.
Yeah, SMU had been leading for a while, and they really pushed to get this on board. He was actually supposed to go to Tennessee this weekend, ended up canceling that visit and committing to SMU about a week or so early. And he'll be back on the Hilltop this weekend for their big game against the Canes on Saturday. Now the face of this 2027 class. First of all, I think you can also get behind me here. There is not a sweeter kid that we cover than Malachi Zeigler. He is one of an all-time favorite already. This guy is like when you're talking to him, he's like the goofiest, sweetest kid, and he is an absolute baller on the field. And I love the fit at SMU. I think that is just mwah. Assuming that Lashley, of course, is on the Hilltop, which with this Arkansas job opening up. But of course, as it stands today, not only do I love the fit with Lashley, but to Eric King, Malachi Zeigler in every camp setting has continued to take steps forward. His anticipation as a thrower, especially downfield, he's got a cannon. He brings that big playability. And, I think what you've seen in the, he's going to have to continue to get better to throw in the middle of the field and rip it and take some off from time to time. But he's continued to take some good steps in that direction. And what I love is he plays for a Benton team that gets beat up a lot. But Malachi somehow is able to escape with some really promising plays and highlights and really putting his team on his back, which has been a theme over the last year and change since he's been at Benton. I think you've told me he's had opportunities to go elsewhere. I know that some schools in Dallas were recruiting him to go play, and we would be talking about him even more. And I think just based off the talent and what he shows in flashes and the strides he's made so far as a young kid, that he's someone that in the offseason we're going to be buzzing about again. I don't know if the production will ever get there as a senior because of what goes on at Benton, but he's definitely someone I expect us to be ringing about when it's his recruiting class coming into front and center.
Yeah, the character and personality dynamics are off the charts, and we're blessed to have the opportunity to cover a ton of awesome kids, awesome families, and really, that's what makes all of this enjoyable when things are chaotic and frustrating in a lot of ways. Just some of those relationships and opportunity to watch some of these guys grow up and realize their dreams is kind of the highlight of all of it. And Malachi is elite, top tier of all of that. That's seeing him, I guess, a year and a half ago or so. The first time I saw him in person was at a Bootleggers North tryout in 7-on-7, and he obviously stands out physically. A big kid with a big arm that could throw the ball all over the football field. But even more than that, just his encouragement of other kids from other schools, other quarterbacks who were competing for the same opportunities that he was there competing for. He was just such a great personality and bright energy to be around, that you saw all of these other kids gravitating toward him. And it was something that a lot of the coaches and I were kind of remarking about of just, look at this kid who has not stopped encouraging every other dude on this field the entire time he's here at this tryout. And the more you get to know him over the last year and a half or 2 years or whatever it's been, just more and more of that you see every step of the way, and then continuing to develop and becoming someone that all last offseason we talked about, not only look at the big arm, but look at some of the accuracy and touch on some of those passes he's been able to show in some camp settings and all of those things as he continues to develop. And so I think the future is super bright for him as he does continue to develop, and whether it be at SMU where he's committed now, or we'll watch what happens with some of these coaching change and whatnot. And he's still got a year and a half before signing day. He's someone we're super excited about as a college prospect.
Yeah, something else that's impressed me is you mentioned his size. He's not afraid to tuck in and run with his size. He is a load to tackle. I think that's going to bode really well in the ACC and obviously potentially beyond. And his ability to obviously extend plays because of that mobility gives him just an added edge, which I just think is so critical in today's football. And he's got some ways to go going up from the speed of the game from Benton to SMU is going to be a little bit of a hike, but he's someone who's shown all the signs that he's able to process and continue to take and absorb and put it on the field. And I'm to beat a dead horse. I'm super stoked about Malachi Zeigler and the Mustangs.
Well, you said beating a dead drum, beating a dead horse. You've got them both covered in the course of this.
That's all I do is I'm going to go beat some eggs and then hit the hay. I don't know.
I really thought that was about to become a weird pause moment.
I just had to stop myself from going viral in a bad way.
Well, let's wrap it up there and let you go back, off camera and into dad mode and all of those things, out there in Texas. But 3 weeks ago, we were talking about, are we going to have enough stuff to talk about on a given week? We're coming up with gimmicks of making sure, we've got a good episode each week. And now I think we're into the back half of this year where we've got too much to talk about every week. And I don't expect that to slow down all the way through signing day with some of the developments around some of these coaching offices around the country. So make sure you're keeping up with us each week. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana Versailles Recruit That Boot. And until next time, y'all be well out there and keep an eye on all the chaos that will continue to unfold, we're sure.
Chaos is a ladder.